Okay, this is lesson 4.3, part 2, and we're picking up with the part 2 of the examples. We're being asked to find each sum. So take a moment and see if you can find the sum for each. Make sure you pause it. Okay, thank you for coming back. I'm pulling up the solution so we can see. Please watch this and see how it compares to yours.
Negative 3/4 plus negative 9/4 equals what number? Negative 3/4 and negative 9/4 are both negative. The sum will be negative. The signs are the same, so add the absolute values. The absolute value of negative 3/4 equals 3/4, and the absolute value of negative 9/4 equals 9/4. Since the fractions have the same denominator, add the numerators. 3/4 plus 9/4 equals the quantity 3 plus 9 divided by 4. This equals 12/4, or 3. Adding the absolute values gives a result of 3. So negative 3/4 plus negative 9/4 equals negative 3.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that's important as you're doing that, when you have two signs that are the same, whether they're both negative or they're both positive, you're going to keep that sign. So in this case, they were both negative, so we knew it was going to stay negative. To make adding simpler, we just took the absolute value and found what that sum was. But we have to remember to assign the negative sign back to that so that our answer does become negative 3. Okay, let's watch the second piece.
Five and 1/10 plus negative 8 and 3/10 equals what number? The signs are different. The sum has the sign of an addend with the greater absolute value. 8 and 3/10 is greater than 5 and 1/10. Since the addend with the greater absolute value is negative, the sum is negative.
So what he did here is he looked at 5 and 1/10 and took the absolute value, and it was 5 and 1/10. He took the absolute value of negative 8 and 3/10 and found it to be 8 and 3/10. So he's finding that this number's absolute value is larger than this. Therefore, this one wins and gets to keep the negative sign.
Subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater. The absolute value of 8 and 3/10 is 8 and 3/10. The absolute value of 5 and 1/10 is 5 and 1/10. 8 and 3/10 minus 5 and 1/10 equals 3 and 2/10. Subtracting the absolute values gives a result of 3 and 2/10. So 5 and 1/10 plus negative 8 and 3/10 equals negative 3 and 2/10.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you followed along, and he switched because we wanted to just find the number, and we had already found the negative sign, so we just took the largest and we subtracted the smallest to make our math easy, and we found it was 3 and 2/10. And then we had to go and grab this negative sign and keep it with it, so that was a negative 3 and 2/10. Make sure that you're writing notes. If you have questions, please make sure that you're reviewing this again and then coming to class with questions. Let's look at the second example, which should be a got it, and it is in your book if you wanted to follow along in the book for that. Sorry, my pop-up is coming up and we don't want to see that. Not my pop-up, my antivirus. Okay, let's listen.
What is the sum negative 2 and 7/10 plus 3 and 2/10?
Okay, so think about what we've just done. Finding we have difference of signs, so now we need to see which one's going to win. The absolute value of negative 2/7 versus the absolute value of 3 and 2/10. So what is the absolute value of negative 2 and 7/10? 2 and 7/10. The absolute value of 3 and 2/10? 3 and 2/10. So which one's bigger? That's correct. The absolute value of 3 and 2/10. So we're going to keep the positive sign. So we know immediately our answer has to be positive. Go ahead and pause and continue to work this problem out and replay it when you're ready to check. Okay, so let's look at the solution, and they're going to walk us through it in case you had some problems. So as we had left and I talked about finding the absolute value, this is what they did. The negative 2 and 7/10. Absolute value is 2 and 7/10. The absolute value of 3 and 2/10 is 3 and 2/10. This is larger, so as though it's going to be a positive answer. So we're going to take 3 and 2/10 and subtract 2 and 7/10. That gives us 5/10. So down here, when we combine these, we know that this is going to be our answer. This step, to me personally, I think I would have put up here so that you can see that the 3 and 2/10 absolute value was going to be bigger than the negative 2 and 7/10. Okay, let's go ahead and go to part 3.
You plant a seed 3 1/2 inches below the ground. Find the sum negative 3 1/2 plus 15 3/4. What does the sum represent?
Okay, this negative 3 1/2 shows us that we're below ground. So if we're thinking of this as the 0 on a number line, we went down. And then from that point, the plant grew and it went upwards. So we see that the height is changing direction. Let's see what Sarah has to say to help us.
Up until the moment the seedling breaks through the ground. The distance it grows reverses the distance the seed was pushed into the ground. And that's an additive inverse in action. And you just thought it was plain old biology.
Okay, I apologize. She was cutting out a little bit, but basically she's talking about the additive type inverse where we went below the ground and then we had to come back up, and then we have to find how far above ground did this grow. So we're finding the sum of negative 3 1/2 plus 15 3/4. Go ahead and take a moment, pause and work this out, and when you come back we'll have the solution pulled up for you to verify. Okay, thank you for coming back. So we saw that we had the negative 3 1/2 plus the 15 3/4. Well, first thing we did is we made this an improper fraction and as well as this so that we can work with these easier. So we have negative 7/2 and 63/4. If you need a fresher, remember that you take the number out here, you take the number on the outside, multiply it to the denominator, which would give us 6, add it to the numerator, which is 1, that would give us 7/2. 7/2. 15 times 4 is 60. Add 3, we got 63/4. The denominator stays the same. We only change the numerator when we're changing a mixed number into an improper fraction. Now, as we're doing this, we need to find a common denominator for both of these. Well, these both have a 2 and a 4, and we know that we could go to a 4. In order for me to do that, I need to say, what do I have to do to this 2 to make it a 4? Well, I have to multiply it by 2. If I do the bottom, I have to do the top, so I need to multiply both top and bottom by a 2. I'm going to get negative 14 over 4. I had to do nothing over here. It was already a 4, so just bring it down to a plus 63/4. Now we add the fractions. When we do that, we come up with 49/4. I need to go ahead and continue to simplify this into a mixed number. 4 goes into 49 12 times. And that would give me 48 minus 49 leaves me with 1 and 4. So 12 1/4. I'm having a little trouble. Oh, went too fast. Sorry about that. Maybe you were able to keep up. I don't know. So the sum of negative 3 1/2 and 15 3/4 represents the height of the flower above ground. the flower is 12¼ inches above the ground. So this is how tall it is above ground, but remember it started 3.5 feet below. So the total distance it grew was this. There's a second method to doing this. The second method is we can separate the whole numbers and the fractions. We can say -3 is the same as -3.5 is the same as -3 plus a -1/2. 15 3/4 is the same as 15 3/4. We can deal with the whole numbers, -3 plus 15, and then we can deal with just the fractions, which is -1/2 plus 3/4. If we do this, we combine 3 and 15, -3 and 15, we're going to get 12. We need to still make these have the same denominator. They need to be a 4. So I had to go, how do I get 2 to 4? I had to multiply both the top and the bottom by 2, which became a -2/4 plus a 3/4. So we found how we got to 12. -2/4 plus 3/4 is going to give me 1/4. Well, 12 plus 1/4 is the same as 12/4. 12 and 1/4. Sorry. And again, that is how far above ground that plant is. Remember, if you have questions, rewind and watch these videos over and take notes again and clarify your notes as best as you can. If watching the video a couple times doesn't assist you, please come in with those questions. Okay, this is a Got It page, and you're going to find that you have this in your booklet if you wanted to follow along with that.
The diagram shows the changes in the water level after the 6:49 a.m. high tide. Which expression represents the water level in feet at the 7:15 p.m. high tide?
Ooh, okay, those of you who are in my science class, tides, love this, right? Okay, so we have a 6:49 a.m. high tide, and approximately 12 hours later, we have another high tide. And 6 hours approximately after that, we have a low tide. So we're needing to see which expression would represent. Okay, so we need to find the expression. So it gives us some answer choices. So let's see. Would 22 and 1/8, or would it be 22 plus -1/8? Oh, sorry, I see it's 2 and 2/10 plus 1/8, 2 and 2/10 plus a -1/8, a -2 and 2/10 plus 1/8, or a -2 and 2/10 plus a -1/8. Take a moment and see what you think it is. Okay, thank you for coming back. Let's see what they're telling us. It's showing us that the water did drop 2.2 feet between the 6:49 and 12:47 times. But the water then rose again. So what we see is the water has dropped, which would be a -2.2, and rose, which would be adding 1.8. This is our answer.